Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I just spent a fair amount of time trying to troubleshoot my video settings, so I'm really hoping that this is good quality. But that aside, I'm excited to talk about today's book because it's related to one of my 2025 New Year's resolutions. So as you can see, I have a lot of books behind me on this bookshelf, and I would say I haven't read like half almost, so I'm really trying to make it a resolution to read the books that I've bought or have been gifted to me or have been handed down to me when other expats have left Singapore. So in that vein, I'm very stoked to be making some progress because I finished this book, Ball Lightning, by Liu Cixin, who is the author of The Three Body Problem. And this was handed down to me by my friend Johnny Perfect when he left Singapore like years ago at this point. But he left me some really good science fiction novels, and this is one of them, and so I'm making my way through them. I was excited to read this because I was a really big fan of The Three Body Problem. I read it when I was living in Beijing, actually, and it was so popular. There were like bootleg versions of the book, like at every corner intersection in Beijing. In the subway underpass, there were like book cart sellers selling it. So it was really like a phenomenon. And then once it like made its way outside of China, Barack Obama even put it on his list of favorite books. So I feel like it really became such a huge deal, and Liu Cixin became so famous for it, and he's really kind of like the main representative of Chinese science fiction or even Chinese literature, because there's not a lot of modern Chinese literature that has made it out to the mainstream, I feel like. So anyway, Ball Lightning is a novel that he wrote in 2005, but was not translated into English until 2018. And I believe Three Body Problem came out. Let me double check. Three Body Problem came out. Oh, it's a film series as well, or a TV series now. Okay, it was originally published in 2006. Okay, so that's interesting. So I think this makes sense as a prequel almost to The Three Body Problem, even though it wouldn't have made it to English readers until much later. But I'll explain a little bit about the premise. So ball lightning apparently is a real thing in the world, but also doesn't really have a fully fleshed out scientific explanation as to how it's made and why it occurs. But this book essentially is just singularly focused on ball lightning, which is like normal lightning, except for it's in a ball and it can move through physical substances, and then its effect is it incinerates or turns to ash certain things that it comes into contact with. So for example, like the integrated circuits in a computer, but not the whole computer, or as what happens to the main character, his parents are incinerated by ball lightning when he is a child slash teenager, like an adolescent. And so that's really where we start off. The main action of the book is he's very traumatized by this ball lightning coming into his home and killing his parents. And so from that point on, he decides to devote his life to understanding what is ball lightning and to figuring out this mysterious phenomenon. I would say the main theme of this book is obsession, which is a very interesting theme and one that just permeates throughout in a variety of ways. You'll see in each of the characters some kind of obsession, and it's really introduced in even only the first few pages when the main character is having dinner with his parents, and before they're incinerated by the ball lightning, the dad is telling the son that basically the only way to have a meaningful life is to pick one problem and to obsessively try to solve it during your lifetime. So this is a quote from the dad. He goes, "The key to a wonderful life is a fascination with something." So I feel like it's a bit on the nose, but I like it when, it's clear what is driving the book. So this fascination with something, in the case of the main character, Dr. Chen, ball lightning, actually in the case of all the characters, is what Liu Cixin is exploring. So we follow Dr. Chen as he goes to school. He runs into another professor, Zhang Bing, who also surprisingly, or like spoiler alert, was also obsessed with ball lightning and trying to figure it out. He runs into like various issues here and there about it not being practical to study it, or about it being kind of like, not really credible because there's no real world applications. There's like an air of mystery to it. And then eventually we meet another key character, which is Ling Yuan, who is a female military official. I forget her rank, but she's pretty high up, and her father's a general. And she is also obsessed, but with weapons. And that's because of how her mother died in combat, being attacked by these like genetically modified attack bees that stung her to death. But she becomes very fascinated with not only weapons, but new concept weapons. And this happens a lot when you read translated Chinese science fiction, but there are certain words where I can tell it's just translated directly from the Chinese. Like, move with decisive action sounds kind of clunky in English, but that's like a direct translation from a Chinese phrase, like decisively act. Is something that is used frequently in Chinese. And so same thing with like new concept or some of these like science and research terms that are a little bit funky. I feel like it's just because of the translation from Chinese. But she's very obsessed with new concept weapons. So for example, she helps to invent like a liquid landmine. And then there's also a very small blade that can cut through anything. So these materials or these nanotech or these animal or bioengineered weapons is her area of expertise. And when she hears about ball lightning from Dr. Chen, the main character, she becomes obsessed with trying to figure out like a military application for ball lightning. And so then that takes up most of the book. And then it really escalates. So by the end of the book, there's a war. There's like a full-blown war, and they're like trying out these different military weapons, and they're fighting a war. And it's never clear who the war is with, but I'm assuming it's like with the U.S. or with Russia or like with some big power. But to take a step back, I think the arc of the book is really starting with the main character's obsession with ball lightning, but then it quickly shifts and moves forward in timeline to kind of the implications of building weapons, what they're used for. And Ling Yuan is really considered by those around her as like kind of dangerous because she only cares about developing this technology and not really the moral implications at all. Yeah, Ling Yuan is like kind of this foil to the main character. Dr. Chen really cares about doing good, and he at first is really driven by just trying to understand what happened to his parents. But then later on, it develops more into he wants to actually like contribute to society and make sure that Ling Yuan doesn't, develop something that would just have a lot of harmful effects without considering like those repercussions. So I would say overall, the thing that's great about this book is just really closely examining one technology, in this case ball lightning. And it is very hard science fiction, although I'm not sure how accurate the science is, but it feels hard sci-fi to me because it's extremely detailed in the explanations. And I won't spoil what ball lightning is, although the spoiler is very nerdy, but you do figure out what ball lightning is, and then that leads to some other implications in terms of originally it was kind of a low impact weapon they could develop, but then later it becomes an extremely destructive weapon because of further scientific discoveries they make about what ball lightning is. But even if that science is not correct, I feel like having it explored and explained was really interesting. And I do like that component to sci-fi. It reminded me a little bit of this book, 2312 by Kim Stanley Robinson, who's another sci-fi author I've read a few works from, in how detailed it is and how it's really trying to explain like the physics behind ball lightning. Again, I don't know how accurate it is. And so I think that is why I finished the book, and that is what really is the strong suit of the book. I would say lowlights are definitely like the plotting is a bit all over the place almost ham-fisted some of the situations that occur. I feel like in isolation, the scenes are really riveting and interesting, but pieced together in the whole book, it kind of just moves from like he's in uni, then later he's in Russia talking to some Russian scientists who also were researching ball lightning. Then they're like in a fishing boat trying to attack a carrier vessel during the war. Then like a nuclear fission plant is under or is being held hostage by this like environmental terrorist group. Like there's a lot of things jammed in there that I don't really think flow in a typical novel kind of storyline, but I kind of gave it some leeway because each of the scenes or little unfoldings were really interesting. And then I would say for the characterization, this was also a critique of Three Body Problem, but I do feel that they are a bit like awkward or like awkwardly written, and I don't know if that's because of the translation, but I do feel like that's just a hallmark of Liu Cixin's writing. I do think it might be a little bit better than Three Body Problem because at least these characters, they do have like emotions and they do grapple with like their own feelings about whether they're doing the right thing, but they are pretty simplistic and the relationships are pretty simplistic. And in particular, I think the portrayal of the only female character is like very textbook written by a man. Like she has her two main defining features are her obsession with weapons and the fact that she's beautiful. And every other man that she comes in contact with is in love with her. So there's like three different people, including the main character, who are all like in love with her. And I mean, it's just told in a very like male point of view. Like if a woman is smart and beautiful, then like everyone will fall in love with her, which I guess could happen in real life, but just the way it's described just felt like very simplistic. So I think like their relationships and the characterizations are a little bit flat, but I still felt, you know, the heart and like the emotional pulse of the main guy. It does kind of get a little bit heavy-handed. So for example, the main character, Dr. Chen, he takes a break from the ball lightning stuff because it's really going down the path of just becoming a weapon. And so instead he tries to work on this technology to detect tornadoes. And he's very successful in figuring out one component of the technology. I already forgot, but essentially his breakthrough is critical in detecting and also destroying or breaking down tornadoes. And so it's like, oh, great, the main character finally is doing something that's like very good for society. And then the next chapter, there's a war and they use that technology to kill millions of people. So it's kind of like, okay, we get it. Like not even when you think you're working on something good, like dual use technologies, things that are for commercial use or for societal use can also be used as weapons. So I do feel like, but I don't know, I kind of give it a pass because of the genre. Maybe that's not the best thing to do, but whenever I read hard sci-fi, it never really has fantastic characterization or like really seamless plotting. Maybe there are a few standouts I can think of, but I kind of feel like this type of writing, along with the guy that wrote Artemis or The Martian, Andy Weir, Kim Stanley Robinson, like all these white guys writing sci-fi, I kind of, don't expect too much, to be honest, when it comes to the characters and the relationships. But anyway, I did want to share something from the afterword because I thought it was really interesting to hear Liu Cixin's thoughts about the tradition of Chinese science fiction. So I'm just reading from the afterword. He goes, China's science fiction was born more than a century ago at the close of the Qing dynasty, but for most of its history it developed in relative isolation, and for a long period was entirely cut off from modern Western science fiction. The field's independent development gave the work of that period a distinct style, a difference that is clearly evident from a comparison of Ball Lightning and the Three Body series. Chinese science fiction during that closed-off period was dominated by the invention story, a form that was preoccupied with the description of a futuristic technological device and speculation on its immediate positive effects, but which barely touched the invention's deeper social implications, much less the tremendous ways such technology would transform society. And so it is with ball lightning. The emergence of such a powerful technological force is bound to have huge, far-reaching effects on human society, in politics, economics, and even in culture. The book addresses none of this. But this similarity to early period Chinese science fiction is only skin deep. At its heart, this is not a Chinese-style story. The ball lightning described in the book may resemble that sort of futuristic device, but the flights of fancy it gives rise to are nowhere to be found in the science fiction of that period. And while the book is set in a China that is altogether real, those little balls of lightning seem like they're trying to transcend that reality, like how a man's tie, within the confines of its narrow dimensions, has the freedom to indulge in a riot of colors and patterns unbounded by the rigid formula of a business suit. Yeah, so I feel like he's kind of reflecting on how, even though at its heart this is a book that is very obsessed with one single technology or invention, he is also trying to transcend that formula by looking at how that ball lightning or that technology inspires like obsession and all of these kind of reactions in the characters that come into contact with it, or flights of fancy is how he describes it. And then he does say that Ball Lightning, in a way, is a prequel to the Three Body series. Yeah, so if you've, I mean, I won't spoil Three Body series, although I feel like it's more likely that you've read that. There are supernatural components. I would say like an echo of paranormal components in Ball Lightning. Basically, once you get into like the quantum realm and like all this physics stuff, then you can't help, I mean, I think it's like a very quick transition to then just get into aliens and the supernatural. And so you do have a little bit of that in the book, but not in a negative way. I thought it was fine. And I also kind of like that component as well. So all in all, I'm really glad I read this and I get to check off, I can put it in the donation pile or give it to someone else and get it off my bookshelf. I'm going to rate it a 3.2 or a 3 out of 5. It was really interesting and it made me think a lot. And I do think it's cool to like, you know, just obsessed about a certain like weird phenomena in the world. But ultimately, like the world building and the character development and the plotting were not strong enough for it to get higher than a 3-star rating. So let me know if you check this out. Let me know if you've read Three Body Problem or any of his other books. I think this might be the last Liu Cixin that I read for a while or ever. But I am going to be checking out more sci-fi and more Asian authors, Singaporean authors, and hopefully get through a lot of these texts on my bookshelf. Until the next time, thanks for watching, guys, and have a good one.